Hi, everybody, and welcome to our world premiere of the Recoveryview Live. Recoveryview.com has been an online journal that I founded 12 years ago, and we've been a little dormant the last couple of years as I've been running a treatment center, but certainly my passion, and I hope everybody can go to recoveryview.com and read the many articles that we've had, original articles for the last 12 years. We just sent out our 49th edition today to coincide with this live show, and that was a throwback. So we have older articles on there, but we have a brand new article from our featured author, who is TJ Woodward, and it just brings me great honor to welcome TJ onto the show to be our first guest for the Recoveryview Live. And TJ Woodward is the founder and CEO of Conscious Recovery and the creator of the Conscious Recovery method. So he has his own method that he helps in treatment centers, and we're going to learn a little bit more about TJ's method. So welcome, TJ.
Thank you, Josie, and great to be here with everyone. I love a world premiere, and I love to be part of it, and I feel such a heart connection with you, Josie, so grateful to be here.
Thank you. I felt that connection as well. And so again, it's an honor to have you as my first guest, because I think we're so much in alignment with the work that we've been doing in the recovery industry, in our personal lives and in our professional lives. Align, very much. I own a treatment center with my husband Jim in Rancho Mirage, California, called Advanced Therapeutic Services. So that's my day job as a CEO of a treatment center, and I've been working in this field for 30 years. But Recoveryview for the last 12 years has been my passion project to get articles out, original articles from colleagues of mine, therapists and doctors and so forth, and just anybody who had nice recovery stories, and we'd publish them. And some of them had even become authors and published their own books after doing original articles for us through the years. So that's exciting that we were able to help launch a few authors, and that's always been a beautiful thing for Recoveryview. So I'm hoping now that we're relaunching everything, we can help authors find their voice. We have the goal originally was to bridge the West Coast and the East Coast, because I do a lot of events through Recoveryview, live events, and I would see all these wonderful clinicians doing their teaching for CEUs, and I'd be a CEU provider, continuing education, and they were so passionate about their methods that they would do with their clients. And so I'd asked them, could you write an article so that people that can't come to the conferences can read about what you're doing, and maybe another clinician will give them some tips, or somebody from the public reading it, it'll just help their heart if they're looking for things. So Recoveryview has been, it's an open forum, basically. So we have articles on addiction, codependency, eating disorder, gambling. We have articles that we had from the View from the Hill, which would talk about new legislation. So anything kind of happening in our industry, and behavioral health, trauma, adolescence. So when you go to the site, you'll notice there are a lot of different categories and many original articles through the years. So I'm just thrilled to have you as part of one of our authors now for Recoveryview. And we're going to link your books, and any links that you have will be on Recoveryview, so people can go there and also click on and get your book and any information about your program. So that's a bit about us and Recoveryview. Now I want to know a lot about you. So can you tell us a little bit about the question tonight was, let's see. The question was, what is spiritual disconnection? And your book and trademark is Conscious Recovery. So can you answer the question, what is spiritual disconnection, for your first question?
Yeah, I love that question, because spirituality and spiritual is one of those words that has such a broad definition that when we hear that word, we might have different interpretations of it. And so for me, in my life specifically, because my own life journey is what actually created, of course, the beginning of Conscious Recovery, I remember feeling very, very deeply connected with myself, very in awe of the world, filled with joy, filled with happiness, when I was the pre-programmed human. right?
Yes.
2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. By the time I was 5 years old, that started to diminish. And by the time I was 7, I had completely disconnected from my essential beingness or my essential self. So for me, that is what spiritual disconnection means. It means disconnecting from our greatest truth, our essential nature, depending on how you use language. Maybe you call it our God essence, our source energy.
Yes.
But in my experience, we all come into this world deeply connected with that. And through life's events, we become domesticated or programmed, and we're taught all sorts of things counter to that. So that's a short definition of spiritual
connection. So now with that, that'll segue us into a little bit of your story. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? And then we're going to learn more about conscious recovery.
Absolutely. So because of that disconnection, and the way that disconnection looked in my life was around the age 7, I remember a physical sensation of closing down. I can remember being in the exact room I was in at my dining room table and the actual physical sensation of closing off. And in retrospect, I recognize that was a strategy to survive. And it really did protect me from a world that didn't feel safe. It also protected me from the loving connection that I was really desiring. So I walked around feeling broken, feeling damaged, disconnected from my truth until I discovered drugs and alcohol at age 13 or 14. And it actually helped me feel in awe again. Very short window. Then it quit working. We've all heard the story, right? And then what once brought me connection brought me more disconnection. Got sober at age 20, right before I turned 21. That began my journey. And so it's 34 years ago now, and I'm extremely grateful for that.
Oh, that's wonderful. 34 years. That's amazing.
Yeah, especially when I tell people I'm 38. So the math doesn't work very well.
I know, you've been sober since you're 4. You were
right. I would make the joke that I drank beer in my sippy cup, but I actually did drink beer in my sippy cup. But that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story. It all started, in the sippy cup for many. So, and then conscious recovery, that evolved from 12 steps, or how did that evolve into a curriculum?
Well, it evolved from my own experience in my recovery. And then 12 years ago, I started working in the addiction treatment field. And I quickly realized what I kind of already knew to be true. And that was so many of the approaches or the treatment modalities were focused on the brokenness in people. They were also focused on symptoms and behaviors. There's whole modalities on the mind, cognitive piece of it, or the behavioral piece of it. And for me, my own recovery journey up to that point led me to a knowing that the deeper root causes need to be addressed. Otherwise, we're just treating symptoms. And without getting down to the deeper root causes, we're just going to keep going back to our addiction, not because there's something fundamentally wrong with that, but because very simply, of course, if I haven't healed some of the trauma, disconnection, and shame, I will return to that strategy of addiction.
That's right. Or even addictive behaviors.
Absolutely.
Whether you use the drugs or not, sometimes the behaviors come up when you don't have the tools from when your subconscious beliefs come. Now, I think it's an interesting time for us right now during this quarantine and COVID-19. It's all pretty much, I believe we're in the middle of a traumatic experience. Absolutely. And we have these throughout our life, but together as a human, as human beings together at one time, we're all experiencing a traumatic experience. Usually our traumas are kind of individualized or maybe, segregated into a situation that doesn't affect other people. But I think it's interesting how right now the entire planet is experiencing the same trauma. Do you have any thoughts on that, or could any of the tools from your curriculum help with the situation we're at now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things I want to focus on with that. One is when we're in the middle of a traumatic experience, we often go into fight, flight, or freeze, right? And right now, I think the one that many of us are experiencing is freeze. Because many of us, most of us are not actually technically quarantined, but we're encouraged to stay in as much as possible, right? Obviously, there are some people in high risk groups that need to stay inside, but there is this collective disconnection, right? Yes. So it goes right into our theme. Unresolved trauma, spiritual disconnection, and toxic shame, I've identified as the 3 root causes of addiction. And the first 2 are being activated right now with, trauma being, as you say, this is a traumatic experience. But what we know about PTSD, for example, the people who have high symptoms of PTSD are actually people that had significant trauma early in life. Mm-hmm. So it's not only what's happening now, it's what's getting activated from the past.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I'm really aware of, because we're kind of, a lot of us, in freeze, once this subsides in whatever way it does, it might be gradual, or it might be, there's something that's medical breakthrough. But once we're kind of through this, I think that's when a lot of people are really going to experience a lot of the pain, because right now we're in survival.
We're in the middle of the survival. Yeah, we're in the middle of the trauma. So I would say you're right, we're in freeze. But down the road, I know, because I'm very involved in our industry and with the state and different federal things that go on, we're talking about the avalanche for addiction that's coming.
Absolutely.
And suicide, and depression and anxiety. So for those of us that work in the field, I think we want to be prepared to help, as we've been doing at ATS. We've been open this whole time, and we've been treating people. And there are people in despair right now and scared. But right now everybody is just kind of in the middle of it. But come next month or the next 2 months, especially with the healthcare the healthcare people, the front lines that are just literally there every day, like MASH, like war zone. We have to be prepared to help them to breathe and to get through that trauma. And so do you think your curriculum would be good for that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're, again, the experience of trauma is usually activating. It's not only what's happening, it's also what gets activated from the past. Yeah. So conscious recovery, there's 2 qualities of conscious recovery that I hope will really help people as we start to thaw out and really start to experience the emotions around this traumatic experience. One is, conscious recovery's foundational principle is, underneath all addictive behavior is a whole and perfect person. And so it's going to help people, because in the midst of the traumatic experience, when I forget the truth of who I am, the trauma is going to be much more significant, right? And so if I believe I am my thoughts, or if I believe I am the conditions of the world, that's where we get into this severe emotional experiences, anxiety, depression, suicidality. And so, as you said, the frontline workers, right? And so I'm actually going into a treatment center here in a couple of weeks to do a 2-day holding of the staff, because a couple people, we're on the front lines in mental health as well.
That's right. We've been on the front lines of mental health. Yes, we have.
Yeah.
During this entire experience, I don't think I've worked more, going in, making sure the facility's safe, doing all the things that I have to do for, quality management, clinical, make sure our clients are taken care of, they're safe, and thank God everybody has been. But as an owner, it's been a lot of responsibility, knowing that we're bringing people into the facility when there could be a risk. But I just go with, what's the bigger risk? Because if they relapse, or they are relapsed or using, they could die that way as well. So they're actually coming in for help. And I think that's a wonderful thing when they can identify during a time like this that they need help, because otherwise it's easy to just let everything go. When there's no end in sight sometimes for a situation.
And I think that's the shadow side of this shelter in place. I understand that medical professionals see the need in it, and not this or that, but in addition to the physical safety, there's also the emotional and spiritual impact of this. And again, we're not really going to see it. We are seeing it now, but we're going to see a huge wave of it as the physical piece subsides a little. So there is, if anyone's watching right now that's feeling that pain, the number one thing I can say is, whatever you're feeling is totally okay.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a lot of judgment, I think, for people. I shouldn't feel this way. Even if we're a mental health professional, I should be strong for my clients. But strength is actually in vulnerability, as you know, Josie. So
it is, definitely.
being in touch with our own emotional experience is important.
It is. There's a lot going on in people's lives with, there's, of course, the shelter in place and the fear of getting the virus. And there's also when you're out and about or you get sick, not feeling like you can go to the doctor. I mean, there are so many different moving parts to this,
Yeah.
The economy and what did this do for my jobs and my business and all of the things that are piling up. And then not just that, people being sheltered in place with family. That's
Yeah.
a huge thing. The domestic violence that's,
Yeah.
going on that we read about or that we can feel energetically. I just, there's a lot going on and behind the scenes at homes after almost going on 3 months being shelter in place.
Yeah.
That has to be a big, I think that's going to be something that we're going to need to address as well. Help with anger management and, things like that are now increasing with this. So, yeah, and the conscious recovery, what I love about it is that's exactly what it is. It's conscious recovery and recovery from anything, and you can use it for anything, because for family members to help with grounding and with meditation and things, that's so helpful when you can just kind of get grounded. Do you have exercises that are helpful, little tools that you think?
Yeah, and I wanted to go back to something you said really early in the interview, and that was about the unconscious, because that's really what conscious recovery is focusing on. How do we get in touch with not only the underlying issues, but also what's trapped in the unconscious? And as you said, it's really running the show, right? My unconscious biases and beliefs about myself and the world, and it's way beyond my thoughts. It's more about the energy that I'm holding about myself. So conscious recovery, I have an online course and I have a workbook and a book. There are a lot of different exercises to help us get down to that, because what we really want to do is provide a space, a safe space, internally and externally, to be able to bring what is in the shadow or the unconscious up to our conscious awareness, so that we can start to make a conscious choice instead of being run by the unconscious programming. So there are many, many exercises. There's, inner child work, there's questioning processes, there are mindfulness practices that will help us really get in touch with that, so we can start to choose instead of being run by the program.
By your unconscious or subconscious beliefs, same thing. Kind of, we created our subconscious beliefs when we were 5 years old, between 5 and 7 years old, and then that's our go-to when something happens. I know from myself personally through this time of the shelter in place, and then my husband has cancer. He was diagnosed exactly about the day we went on lockdown, so now he's starting his treatment. And I've shared this before, so people know that. And a lot of people know Jem, and and love Jem. And it's just been a difficult time to balance both for me. So there are times when I get very overwhelmed, and then I realize that I'm going back to my old subconscious beliefs by just being frozen. Like you said, you're just frozen. I go, sometimes I just don't even, my thoughts aren't clear. I'm not sure. I forget things. And I'm like, well, I can't focus. So then I have to use the tools. I'm like, okay, one day I went, tools. What have I learned all these years? What do I teach? What do I, Josie, what are your tools you've learned? Because all of a sudden I felt like a 7-year-old again, back as that 7-year-old that's frozen, where that disconnection happened. And so then I would, go from there. And at least I was aware that I was going back there, and then, do some prayer, meditation. It's hard because in the recovery world right now, there are no 12-step meetings. In the spiritual world, there's no church. So that's been difficult for people as well, because they can't be with their community for support. So, having tools available, or joining some of these Zooms. I know we were just talking about Zoom overload as well. So keeping that balance is just wow, it is quite a time.
Yeah, how to maintain connection. And of course, there are a lot of spiritual communities. There are a lot of support groups for recovery and spirituality online now. But in my experience, there's something really fundamentally different about being in people's energy field. And one of the things that you spoke to that I want to touch on is, during this time, these deeper parts of ourself can get touched, right? And before I had the tools to work with what happens when those get touched, I will automatically go into my strategy. So in conscious recovery, we focus a lot on the core false beliefs and the energy of those core false beliefs. And as you said, those happen at age 5, 6, and 7, 3, 4, 5. That's why it's not a cognitive process only to heal this, because the cognitive process is mostly looking at the symptoms. We call in conscious recovery addiction or any other sort of what we have traditionally called coping mechanism, we call them brilliant strategies. And so my 5-year-old, for example, one of my strategies was to go in my room and close the door. So that was how I felt safe. And that was a strategy, that retreat strategy was with me for many, many years. And that can still come up. My 2 deepest core beliefs growing up were I'm not worthy and I'm not lovable. And so one of the ways that I've worked with the strategy of I'm not lovable is please love me, please love me, please love me. But of course, we know that that doesn't really completely heal it. I had to do the deeper work of really getting in there. And, you know, my recovery at some points has looked like in the fetal position, sobbing for that little boy. I look at a picture of my 4-year-old and think, gosh, you're so precious. But I felt broken already by 7, 6.
I literally had to pull out, I pulled out a picture of my baby picture and, you know, a couple other pictures and put them on my kitchen table with some flowers and a candle just to kind of bring that back to me, the love of, because I felt like I was losing my child for a minute there. I was losing that joyful person. And so that helped me to just put a picture of my child out and love that child because, you know, she was so darn cute in her little dress.
I have this picture of myself that I often share when I was 3. And it was just, I was filled with joy and I was this effervescent little boy. And then I look at pictures at 6, 7, 8, 9, and there's a sadness there. So I honor part of recovery is embracing that sadness from those, you know, middle-aged children's years. But really, it's also about getting in touch with, as you said, about that little joyful boy that's still in there.
Yes. That's still there, that just loves to be hugged. Okay, we have a question now. Let's open this up for questions. Thank you. Jana is asking, and I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, it's Aborska. And her question is, how can we evolve fastest? Do you have an answer to how do we evolve fastest? Jenna, I'd like to know.
Thank you, Jenna, for the question. And I'm going to answer it in 2 different ways. It can take a lifetime and it can happen in an instant, right? These leaps of consciousness. But I want to start by saying my addiction, and I'm only speaking for me, my addiction wanted something really quick relief, quick answers, quick growth. And I think American culture in particular, we want that quick fix, right? So there are definitely practices that have instantly shifted me, but there's also the deeper work that has taken time. Part of it is for me to recognize that there's really, truly only this moment, and that I have this idea that there's some destination. So the quickest way for me to evolve is to recognize on some level, I'm already awakened. I'm already a whole and perfect person. And that's the foundational principle of conscious recovery. So then it becomes, how do I unlearn all the crap that I've picked up? And how do I create a space to return to that wholeness? And so even the idea of a quick evolution could be reframed to, what if it's already all within me? How do I create a space to start rediscovering? Because I really know if I look at a little infant, there's no way I can see that little baby is broken. That is a whole and perfect being. And if that's true, then it becomes more about remembering and returning rather than evolving towards something. So I hope that answered it.
And I'll give, if I can, I'll pipe a little bit in from my, because I'm writing a book right now. And one of the chapters, we have something written about evolution, a lot of stuff about evolution, as you have as well. And really, there's no other place to go but to evolve. Right? We're all evolving every moment, even though it doesn't feel like we're evolving, we are evolving. Every emotion is an evolution. Every breath we take is an evolution on this planet. in the physical realm, just looking at it from another, perspective, is that we are constantly, there's really no way to go backwards. It may not feel like we're evolving because it totally feels like we're stuck in tar. I get that. But even that time, we are evolving. Every minute, there's only evolution. And so sometimes to remember that. Now, Jana has a few things. I want to read some of her comments here. It says, a safe place to bring the shadow of the unconscious programming to the light so we can make conscious decisions and live a different, more empowered life. Thank you, Jana. That's beautiful. And then it says, she also put, is it possible to truly live without the ego? Live from the soul mainly.
I love this.
Beautiful question.
I'm giving you a virtual hug because I really want to speak to what you're saying because I think it's really important. As a matter of fact, in Conscious Recovery, the very first chapter in the section called Breaking the Cycle of Addiction is creating safety. Now, when we think of safety, we often think of it as an external, and that is absolutely important. That's why we, for example, in early recovery, we have treatment programs, we have sober living environments. We're going to ask, are your relationships really feeding you? But the deeper work is the internal safety, right? The internal, having our nervous system be able to manage the deeper emotions. And so there is the safe place, like a safe therapist, a safe support group to start this process, Jana, as you said, of bringing the shadow up into conscious awareness. But there's also the internal and that creating that internal safety. And I love your question about the ego. I spent at least 20 years thinking the goal was to get rid of the ego. And my friend, Dr. Sue Morter, says only ego would want
I love Dr. Sue Morter.
Yeah. And she said only the ego would want ego to die.
Yeah.
Right. And so the issue with the ego, it has gotten a really bad rep. It's just our personality self, our point of view. Now, the issue for me is when the ego is in charge, or I believe I am my ego, that's where I suffer. When I recognize I have an ego, but I'm not my ego, there's the shift. Because then I no longer need to get rid of anything because that's addiction. Let me get rid of this. Let me change this. Let me not feel this. Let me numb this. Recovery or spiritual growth, if you're not a person in recovery, is really about embracing. I've had to really learn how to love my personality self. And in the awakened state, the ego becomes a delivery system for spirit, right? So we all have our unique gifts. My first spiritual teacher, she would no more do an interview like this or get up in front of a room. Her gift was one-on-one. And she said to me one time, you're so extroverted, you're going to be able to use your personality to deliver this message in a larger way.
Yes. One thing that we wrote, because I had asked just spirit questions as I'm writing my book and said, well, why me? Why am I writing this book? And then they said, well, why not you? That's your ego saying you can't do it, right? Like for me to even say I didn't be nervous about doing the show, that's my kind of my ego self saying, no, you can't do that. You're not, you might embarrass yourself, or something like that. And that's, so it's sometimes the opposite of what we even think ego is too. It could just be that scared person not wanting to be embarrassed, but that's actually could be considered ego as well, because you don't want to fall and things like that. So ego is an interesting, very interesting topic, and it is part of who we are. As you said, and Dr. Sue Morter says, it's beautiful. It's the dualities of spirituality. There's so many dualities about every question. So
much paradox in it. Yeah.
Yes. And then she put here from Karen. Hi, Karen Palmer. When you realize you have an ego, but you are not the ego, that is freedom.
That is the deepest level of freedom, because we often have believed or been taught, and I know, Carl Jung says we spend the first 40 years of our life developing an ego, and the second 40, I don't remember what word he uses, but I think he might even say dissolving it, right? Now, I don't know, 40. That was true for me, right? Because it's important for me to have the ego strength, to be able to feel good about myself. But then I'm like, oh, wait, that's not who I am. That's what I have.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting topic. Let's see. She put, question from Jana. What have been the most important teachings in your spiritual transformation? It's a great question.
I think the biggest spiritual teaching is that we're already whole and perfect. I thought. I came into New Thought teaching about 2 years after I got sober. So in 1988, I started exploring like metaphysics, and I started reading, and I was so hungry for it, but I believed I needed to get somewhere. And I spent, I was in my 20s, so it's a natural thing to try to get somewhere.
Right.
And the greatest spiritual teaching came from Mary Helen Brownell, my first teacher. And she has had this beautiful Southern accent, and she would say, "Darling, you're already precious. You're already whole and perfect." That's the great spiritual teaching. And then it's about unlearning rather than learning.
But catching up with the fact that you're perfect, right?
Yeah,
we have to catch up with our own, identifying that we are perfect. And that's the toughest as a human, I think, to see ourselves as perfect. Meaning perfect, in God's sense, that we're just exactly where we should be.
Right. Not looking for ego perfection, because I spent a ton of years thinking I needed to look perfect on the outside. You're speaking of this inherent spiritual perfection. That's totally different.
That's right. Exactly. And they sometimes all work out when we're lucky. Now, we have another question here from Isabella. She's asking, yes, that's what I'm working on. It needs to be internal safety. And I am a recovering spiritual bypasser. Wow, that's very cool.
I love that.
Recovering spiritual bypasser. I love it.
I have a whole section in Conscious Recovery called Spiritual Bypass. And so for anyone who's watching that may not be aware of what she's talking about, when we say it's only love and light, or I'm going to use spiritual, this is for me again, spiritual principles to not address the shadow, or not address the deeper emotions, or not even address the ego self, just go straight to spirituality, like everything's perfect, everything's love and light. And although that's true on one level, we can also use it to bypass some of the deeper processes of transformation, like embracing the shadow, like healing some of those early childhood wounds.
Yes, and and they catch up with us either way, right? Sometime in life, that shadow will catch up if we don't face it or walk through it. I think you say in yours, it's just to walk through to the other side and, just keep going. What was that saying you have that I think we talked about, where when you're just walking through it rather than
Well, I like to look at it as integrating too, right? Integrating all parts of myself, right? Instead of rejecting the ego or rejecting what we call the shadow. What about embracing all of it? What if it's all spiritual? What if there isn't good, bad, right, wrong? What if it's all a journey? And in that way,
that's definitely,
yeah. And in that way, if we look at what's happening in the world, we're not, because the bypass, if we did a spiritual bypass, we would say, well, there's really good in all of this that's happening. Well, there's also pain in what's happening, right? And there's also transformation happening. We're collectively, like if you look at what's happening politically, the shadow's coming up for us to take an honest look at. And the shadow is division, it's blame. And we know right now that we're in the midst of a profound transformation where more and more of us are willing to work on our own internal shadow, and then we can start working on it collectively.
And I like to think of it also as a mirror, that when I start judging somebody or something, that I think, oh, that's just, then it's a mirror back to me, basically, a lot of times. And that gives me an opportunity to see that, shadow, quote unquote, or that part of me that I'm not in alignment with. Why am I so upset about what somebody else is doing? What part of myself is missing if I'm so upset about what they're doing? I always love it when I get reminded of that, right? It's like, but no, it's no, look at the mirror. I'm like, oh, okay. But that's actually empowering when you do that, because then you realize it's not that, it just takes the responsibility back to all of us individually, but yet as one golden thread, we're all one together. So again, that's all that duality that's profound.
Exactly. And when I recognize that the wound is getting touched for my own healing, then I can start welcoming that, and opinionating is deflecting. And what you're saying, Josie, what I love is, and here's another spiritual practice, one of the most profound, when I noticed myself being irritated or angry or judgmental or opinionated, I would look at the person and say, in what ways do I act that way? In what ways have I done that? But then I took it a little deeper.
Mm.
Because if it's true we're all one, then
Yeah.
I say to the person, look at me doing that. Isn't
Oh,
it interesting that I'm doing that?
yeah.
And then I like to look for what's the request for love, because we've often
Mhm.
heard everything is love or fear. And I like to say everything is love or a request for love. What is this person really wanting in this? Are they wanting to be seen or heard? That's what my opinions have always been about.
Well, I
Right.
think that's true too. I have a 4-year-old, well, he's 4.5-year-old grandson. And so when he's, kind of acting a little wild Indian around, and I'm like, Nolan, what, and then he's looking for attention. Basically, Nanny's not spending enough time with him. So then as soon as I put down whatever I'm doing and ask him what he wants to do, can I play with him, whatever, and everything is just calm. He was just wanting that, that time with me where I was busy, and then he was starting to try to get my attention in interesting ways.
Yeah, when I was an integral part of raising my nephew when he was really young, and I quickly realized if there was anything that we might call a tantrum, which really is just him having a feeling, right?
Yes.
It's only a tantrum in my judgment of it,
Right.
right? And what I realized, if I could get down to his eye level and
Mhm.
simply look at him,
Mhm.
really look for the essential self, he would calm down every time.
Yeah.
It was almost like, wow, this is really easy.
Mhm.
See him, love him, honor him,
Yes.
and
Yes.
he would calm
Yeah, the
down.
children just want to be seen, especially right now. Everybody's at their, last nerve, and the parents are, and everything. And we get it. I mean, I know when my 3 kids, when we were at home or on vacation together for a whole week alone, it'd be like, wow, by the end of the vacation, we're ready to be home. I can't imagine several months at home. So, they're just, again, just they're trying to be heard. The children right now are trying to be heard because it's difficult to even hear ourselves or each other. So, maybe a little at home restart on that if possible for the children, because and just with the hopes that soon, and very soon, I think we'll be able to go outside. And now there are a lot of them, kids are going outside, let them run around the park now, because that's what parents would count on, is kids going to school, and the kids would count on that as well, and running around and getting tired and coming home. And, so soon all that'll be again. But in the meanwhile, it's been an interesting time for families. It's been a
Yeah,
blessed time to spend together, but I'm sure it's been a very interesting time.
everything has a light and a shadow, right? I love
Yeah.
spending a lot of time with my husband, but we've had our moments during this where it's like, oh, let me give him some space. I also think about our own inner child really needs to be heard and seen right now
Yes.
too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back to that picture. Now there was a question that just popped up. Okay, Jana, can you share the most important books that have changed your life? Great question.
Absolutely. I love to share my favorite books, starting with, I think I could speak of some of the books that were early in my journey that had a really profound shifting quality. But my favorite book that changed my life more than any is Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. I
Mhm.
mean, it absolutely spoke to my heart and my soul in profound ways. I also love Byron Katie. I love her book, Loving What Is. I
Yes.
love anything that Pema Chodron writes. I just think she has a gentle, gentle way of approaching spirituality. I remember reading her and hearing her say the intention of meditation is to learn how to have compassion and love for ourselves. It's not about quieting my mind. It's about learning how to love myself regardless, love that judgment, love that joy, love that
I love all
sadness.
this.
So
Love it
those are
all.
my
How it
three.
all come from your heart space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Byron Katie has wonderful energy. I don't know, about 15 years ago, Lee McCormick and I and Gary Seidler, who we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
started, we did a couple conferences a couple years in a row called Spirit Recovery Conference.
Nice.
And I remember we had so many of these wonderful, wonderful spiritual authors that were our speakers, and Byron Katie was one of them. And I'll always remember that. That's just one of those moments when you meet somebody who, and I was the MC, so I was in charge of taking her and being right next to her, putting her up on stage, all that stuff. And I really didn't know who she was up until that point, but her energy was
Isn't
so
that
peaceful
wonderful?
and beautiful that I'll always remember that I was nervous about somebody was on the stage and wouldn't leave, stop singing or whatever, and she just put her hand on my knee and said, "It's perfect."
Yeah.
And I thought, it is? Okay. So, but I mean, that was probably 15 years ago. And it just, when you mentioned her name, I just thought, what a great time to, think about people like that in our lives that have changed, what a great question. What books, what authors, who are the angels that have been in our lives as humans?
Yeah, and I also, of course, want to speak to Marianne Williamson.
Yes. Oh, yes, tomorrow night. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Tell us about that. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So her book, A Return to Love, was one of my earlier books. So I think it came out in the early 90s, and it was really powerful and profound. And I've always felt a real deep heart connection with her energy, with her charisma, with her, ability. She blends the heart and the mind so beautifully. I love that. And I do have an opportunity to share with the audience. I'm interviewing her tomorrow on a live interview at 2 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. I've had the honor now of working with her, connecting with her. One of the things that she's really interested in, as you know, and I'm sure most people watching, bringing spiritual principle into politics.
Yes.
Good for you to have that calling. That is not mine, but I'm willing.
It's difficult. It is, and in a sense, I just, from being the CEO day job and working with leadership and bringing the spirituality into that, it's very important to do. It's just, everybody is searching for a little bit of light, especially in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I love that she's bringing the spirituality into the political world, and that she's so wise and knowledgeable at the same time. So what a wonderful opportunity for you to bring her onto. Now, how can people find that interview?
If you just, there it is. If you just go to tjwoodward.com, that's my website. You'll see a link right there. Click on it. You can get free tickets. This is a totally free event. We're going to record it. So at some point in a week or so, we'll also put it out on social media, but it's a live webinar. So you do need to get a ticket, but you'll be able to come into and watch the interview live free.
I sent it to my list this morning, and I think I got a bunch of good response. So that's wonderful. People are excited about it. Everybody loves Marianne Williamson, and you as well, because now you've been on a really, just going and speaking everywhere, and that you can at different conferences. What's been your favorite event over the last couple of years? Can you think of something that
oh my gosh, this is
I know that's a trick question, but
this could be seen as a diplomatic answer, but it's also very true. I love all of them. I've spoken to 5 people and 500 people, and I love all of them, and 1,000 people. And I just love being in the energy exchange that comes with speaking. I have also enjoyed, I've been, like last week, I had 8 or 9 speaking events online. They are great. And there's nothing like being in person.
I can't wait as an event planner, because for 20 years, that's been my passion through Recoveryview, is planning conferences and emceeing conferences and bringing people together. I really miss that. I do miss, and I can't wait until we can all be together again. I keep posting that on Facebook. I'm like, I can't wait for us to be together again at an event, at, just something fun. And Denise Klein is saying hello. Hi, Denise.
Hi, Denise.
We love Denise.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for being here. Yeah, and Josie, you and I are going to do some stuff together once they let us connect and hug.
Yes, once we can, absolutely. And with Denise, we've been talking about at the ranch for a couple years, doing a carnival for the industry and for people that want to come, because at the milestones at Calamigos Ranch, they have the big Ferris wheel, they have everything there, and we thought we'd bring in like the little fish games, where you win goldfish and kissing booths and all that, like a real carnival and bring your family on a Sunday and have some speakers and just all get together. And I think once we're able to do something like that, that would be a lot of fun to have our carnival. And we'd love for you to come and be part of our carnival.
Of course. I love to play. My little kid loves to play all the time.
We're all going to play together, and it'll be beautiful in Malibu. So I can't wait for that. Let's see if we have any other questions before we keep going. Let's see. I don't know. Does anybody have any questions for us? For TJ? I see something here from Isabella. Okay. Yes, there's nowhere to go but through. Mhm.
Absolutely. Because I don't know
Yes.
about you, but I tried to go underneath it, around it, and over it for at least the first 10 years of my recovery, my spiritual journey. I wasn't really necessarily aware I was, but I was doing a lot of spiritual bypassing. I actually think it's perfect because it was a perfect part of my journey. But
Uh-huh.
then I met this point where I realized, as you said, Josie, like, when I was no longer running from it through drugs and alcohol and shopping and all the things that I had done, I had to meet myself, right? And there was a moment in my journey when my whole world collapsed. And it was when I said yes to becoming a spiritual teacher. Everything
Mhm.
fell apart. And I had
Isn't that the truth during that transition time? Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
so it's an important part of it. And
It
I
is.
I knew though, because this was like 20 years into my recovery. I'd already done a lot of work of working through it, of walking through it and embracing. But there was a deeper level that came when I said yes to the calling to be a spiritual teacher. And
Yes.
I knew at that point that I needed to lean in. And I
Mhm.
actually, there was one 72-hour period that I won't forget. I closed my curtains. I did not leave my home, and I just stayed with it. And I knew that it was the time to go through some of these, what we would consider darker experiences.
Mhm.
They're not really darker. It was really healing. It was
Yes.
so healing. But it started with me being really activated, feeling judged, feeling not seen, feeling
Mm.
not loved. And I knew this is not what's happening. This is that wound getting touched for my healing. So I leaned in. I think I stayed in bed for 72 hours and I cried and I just allowed myself, knowing that it was transformative. You know, we hear
Beautiful.
shift happens, but I also now say fertilizer happens.
Oh, that's right. Fertilizer. Yes.
Fertilizer. Yeah.
Yes. That's true. That I kind of sometimes feel that these days that's where I'm at about. I've said yes to God and the angels several years ago to write the book, but then I've been a little stagnant, and now I'm like, okay, I'm being reminded of my yes, and
Yeah.
I'm walking through it right now. I feel it 100%. I feel that's what's going on. Thank you for reminding me of that. So I don't get into my head and try to tell it another story, which is very easy to do. Let's
Mhm.
see. Oh, Denise says, yes, a real carnival and sober fun day to share the light. And that's what we're going to do in Malibu. We are going to have fun and we'll invite everybody for that. That's for sure.
You know,
Thank you, Denise.
we're so connected because someone totally seemingly separate said, you need to meet Denise. She has this great place and do something in Malibu. So it's great the way things,
Yeah,
come
we're
together.
all connected. We're all connected. And we
Yeah.
recognize each other when we meet. We're like, oh, you're very familiar. That's how we were that day when we first were talking.
Yeah.
I felt very connected to you. Let's see. We have, yes, been running all my life. Yes, I know I'm being prepared for what I don't know, but geez, it is sore. That's from Isabella. It's sore while she's going through it.
Yeah, and to honor that pain and to not run from
Mm,
it is a deep calling, right? I think that's why people use the term spiritual warrior.
yeah,
I don't love that term because I don't want to be at war with it, but I
right.
understand that because it's
Yeah.
like it takes a great deal of courage to lean into the pain,
To
to
look into
just know that we're transforming, right?
it.
Because in the midst of it, if I can also know there's a place within me that is unharmed and unharmable, that's the
Mm,
light, that's the true beingness. And there's also this other experience. And when I can allow myself to feel all of it, moment to moment, and lean in, that's where the real transformation comes in. And I
mm,
love that you said, I don't know why or where it's going. That's the ultimate freedom, too. I don't need to know the why. That's
that's
my
right.
mind. I
Yes.
say, there is something happening here, and I am saying yes.
That's my favorite. That is my favorite. When I just get back into that saying yes and just believing the faith, if you will, of knowing that you're basically following your eternal being of who you truly are. So we're following our eternalness. Is how I see
Yeah.
it. I feel like that when I'm in that spot, like I'm really being true to my eternal self.
And
And
that's
it's
why
hard to explain that, but yeah.
when we look at it through the addiction or recovery lens, we're not broken.
Right.
Right. And so there are a lot of modalities. A lot of clinicians are trained to look for what's wrong and how to help them. And I understand the spirit of that, but there's also the side effect of that, if you will, is the more we look at our clients or ourselves in recovery as broken, the more we experience our brokenness. The more we hold each other in the space of the infinite possibility of healing, this shadow work and this bringing the unconscious up, that it becomes a safe place to do it. But if I'm viewing myself or my clients as broken, how can we possibly ever move into the deeper healing?
That's amazingly said. Exactly. I really hope that more treatments. Do you have treatment centers in your curriculum? I'd like to help you get that information out to the facilities I know as a tool, as an option to use groups in their practice. How can they do that?
Yeah, so if you go to consciousrecovery.com, there's actually different ways. I am really clear that I want to be able to offer conscious recovery at every level. So right now, I just launched a fully immersive online clinical training, and you get 10 CEs when you finish it, and that's really intended for private practice. I also have full training. I go into treatment centers. We do a 2-day training. There's a whole.
I think we're going to be doing that at ATS. I gave it to our clinicians, and they're excited to get started. And they're like, "Well, does he come down? How do we do this?" I said, "I'm not sure. I'll talk to him." So I'm excited to integrate it into ATS for sure.
Yeah, thank you. So right now there are multiple treatment programs, mostly in the Bay Area, that are certified conscious recovery programs, and it's really just adding something to the great clinical work that a program is already using. So, whether it's a 12-step based program, a DBT, a CBT, all of it, it's really intended to offer just one more layer that will really help your clients get down to the deeper root causes and break the cycle of their addiction.
Great, because at the end of the day, it's all the same, and everybody's different. So somebody might resonate with one modality versus the other. Not everybody, So it's great to give the clients different tools. I call it their toolbox, because once they leave treatment, all they can do is go with the tools and let God take care of them. We don't have.
I love that, because I just did an interview with Dr. Jason Schiffman. I don't know if you know him, but he's the owner of the Camden Center in LA, and they use conscious recovery. And he said it's like going to a mechanic. A wrench is great, but a wrench doesn't fix everything on your car. And so recovery is one of the tools. DBT is one of the tools. 12-step is one. So that's really, and conscious recovery is a full system of care, and it's 12 weeks of residential curriculum, 12 weeks of outpatient. There's a workbook, there's online. So I'm really excited. We're at a really exciting moment where more and more people, I think, are receptive to this idea in wholeness and how we treat someone as whole.
I think people are definitely seeking right now for answers, and they're just ready, kind of teed up, waiting for the next thing. Almost like when you said you were hungry at one point. I think a lot of people are hungry right now for answers, because the old answers aren't quite working anymore. And we can't really make very many plans anymore. So we definitely, like Eckhart Tolle, we're all living in the now. We don't have another choice, right?
That's right.
So it was philosophical before. Now it's just reality to live in the now.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting.
It really brings up the knowing of the not knowing. Right? We, our mind wants predictability, but the true freedom, and we talked about this earlier, but true freedom is knowing that the external world is unknown. And we have these moments where it's really clear, and that doesn't mean that we don't know that there's a place within us that is known. And when I know that place within myself, and that's really what Eckhart is talking about when he's talking about the now. He's not talking about tick tock, living in that time now. He's talking about getting down to the eternal now, that place of infinite. I remember my first teacher.
The place of no time. The place of no time.
The place of no time. Thank you.
Yeah. that's the great place where there's no time. But we all have to come back to the time, because that's where we are, right? We're literally balancing the being in the place of no time to the place of gravity and time, where we are actually being called to evolve. So it definitely can get a little deep, but it's all exciting work.
A great spiritual master 2,000 years ago said, "Be in the world, but not of it," and that's what we're talking about.
It's all the same messages that are wonderful. And when our spirits are open, then we hear them clearly, don't we? And that's what I think is beautiful. Now, do you have a tool that you'd like to share with us, a little meditation or something that maybe a little takeaway that our audience might remember, tomorrow or tonight if they're feeling down or feeling, confused?
Yeah, the one that comes up for me is one of my favorite ones to talk about, and that is living in the question. If it's true that we create what we call reality based on our point of view, right? That's very Byron Katie. That's
Yes.
kind of CBT and DBT too. What am I making this mean? So if I create what I call reality based on my point of view or my opinions or my, unconscious biases or beliefs, how do we start to shift those? One very simple practice is called living in the question. And it's really simple. You choose an open-ended question that is empowering, that doesn't start with why. I'll explain that in a moment. You can do it multiple ways, but two I'll share right now with the viewers. One, in your meditation, so set your timer for 10 or 15 minutes, whatever that time that feels right for you, and invite one question, because the intention of living in the question is not to look for the answer, but to look for all the different possibilities that lives within that question. So right now in our time, for example, questions that might be helpful for people: what is wanting to emerge during this time? Who have I come here to be? What is mine to contribute to the world right now? Some other ones that have really helped me, if I notice myself going through a period of frustration or anger or judgment, what am I making this mean? Right. So if I'm having trouble with forgiveness, what am I making this mean? Now, when in doubt, I always use the question, what else is possible? Because that one is just like a go-to. So again, you can set your timer for 10 minutes.
It's almost like a labyrinth experience, but with yourself and an exercise. I know sometimes I'll go do a labyrinth and have a question. I come back in the middle, get an answer for a totally different question. I don't know. It's an interesting time though with a question. You start a labyrinth with a question before you walk in. I love that. So it's almost like a labyrinth exercise meditation tool.
Exactly. And you just sit with it.
And you set your timer for how long
however long it feels right for you. Another way to practice it, if you really want to have some fun with it, is you can set a timer for 3 minutes and look at yourself in the mirror, ask the question, answer it with a short answer, ask the same question again. Answer.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. So
like, see how many answers come through.
Yeah. And then
so it actually evolves. So it goes from the answer in your mind, whatever your thoughts are telling you, and then then at the end it might be an answer that's coming divinely, because you're like, well, where did that answer come from? It could be.
Yeah. Like a question like, who am I? You might start with, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a CEO, I'm a and then
all those people who really aren't.
All right. And then I'm a spiritual being. I'm an infinite possibility. I am that I am, so.
It evolves. That sounds like a fun one. Yeah. Especially right now, we're all at home and we have, a little bit of time on our hands and mirrors and things to do. That sounds like a fun game. It sounds like a fun game you could play with your family too, or tell them about it and the kids.
Well, you can do it in pairs too. If you're sheltered in place with someone else, that's part of the conscious recovery curriculum.
Oh, wow.
We do that with clients. Clients I was going to say clients love it. They either love it or they really hate it, but they get something from it. What do you mean? You're going to ask me the same question? So like partner A will just ask the same question over and over again. And there's something in that process. Even if you just answer it the same over and over again, there's something powerful that happens.
Sounds like your curriculum could even be fun at home these days. It is something you can try at home. Try conscious recovery at home.
There you go.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Do you have any parting words? We've got 2 more minutes. Anything that you'd like to share with the group?
Yeah, my closing words tend to be the same every time. And that is, if no one has told you yet today, you are a whole and perfect spiritual being, and that you came into this world as a precious being, a light being, whole and perfect in every way. And just a reminder of that is still the ultimate truth of who and what you are.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. And again, TJ, thank you for being our guest tonight, the first guest of our relaunch and our world premiere of Recoveryview. I know I have one friend that was on earlier from Chicago, and she's probably gone to sleep now, but she stayed up. And then I see my husband, Jim, on there. Hi, honey. And can you see me, Jim? No, I can see you. Okay. He's anyways, I think he just got off. Anyways, thank you so much. Our next show will be on the 7th of June, I believe. So it's going to be it's always going to be the first Sunday of each month. And that's when we're going to have our 50th anniversary edition, our 50th edition. So we're going to launch out our 50th edition. If you want to get our 50th edition, just go on to the recoveryview.com and sign on as a subscriber. You'll get the edition. And we're going to have a panel of a few of our authors. So that's pretty exciting. I'm excited about doing that. And I hope that you're always going to be part of the Recoveryview family. You're always, always part of my family by heart. And I can't wait to see you in person. Yes. And out of respect for our audience, it's 8 o'clock, and love and light to everybody. And I hope that you have a blessed week. And thank you so much for being part of the Recoveryview show.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Namaste.